none of the UROC would exist if we didn't have the land access agreement. Like that's a key part of our existence, and all these trails are going to outlive us. Think about that. So yeah, I guess I can kick that off.
Yeah.
Back in the day, when I guess the first recreation trails were sort of kicking in Cumberland in like the early 90s, around the clunker era, when folks went across to the North Shore and started messing around with bikes there, and they got pretty buzzed on what was happening, and then they came back to the island. And so the first recreation trails started hitting Cumberland back in the 90s, and then along came the actual evolution from clunker to bikes with some sort of pneumatic suspension, or like better brakes and stuff like that. So that, of course, the trails started getting more exciting, and along came 2000s, and people started putting on mountain bike races and stuff, and there was these pretty, I don't know if I'd like to get on those bikes now.
Yeah.
But there was some pretty rad bikes created, and consequently some trails created. And I think in the early 2000s, there might have been 15 pretty good trails in Cumberland that were purely recreation and still exist today, quite a few of them. And that was right around when Grosby wanted to start a race. So he approached the forestry companies that own all of this land, because Cumberland's all on private land, right? All forestry private land, and then partially municipal land. He wanted to put on a race. So he had to approach the forestry companies to ask permission. And doing that year after year meant that the forestry companies were like, well, why don't you get organized, and why don't you set up an organization, and instead of asking every time you want to put on a race, you can maybe ask one time, we'll get a land agreement, and you can put on whatever races you want. So I think in 2008 they'd put on several races, and 2008 there was a conversation about, let's get a land agreement together. So mountain bikers got organized, and it took them, 7 years?
Yeah.
And UROC was founded, I think, in 2008. Context of an ultra busy trail network and managing like a massive trail network, 200 and something kilometers of trails over 6,500 acres. It's one of the things that's really important, that you are required, with the land agreement, we're required to put trails in that are strategically, like we've got a rationale. They're strategically placed in the network. They're going to be easy to maintain. They're going to be sustainable, and they're also going to be able to afford high volume trail traffic, like a lot of people. But when you're not dealing with a really busy network and you're just an individual builder and you want to build a trail, sometimes you'll just go in and start busting in and create your trail and just create an experience that satisfies you, so it might not be fully thought through, and it might not be the best result for where to put the trail or how to manage the trail. But in the long run, it's a volunteer putting in a trail, and where that's become one of the key things with UROC is that UROC was formed and we took over the network to manage it and maintain it on behalf of the landowners on the private lands. But what we had to really be careful with is to still facilitate the local community of trail builders and still respect all the work and effort that they've put in. So we've got this organic network that sort of evolved through time with that style of trail building from that builder over there, and there's that style of trail building with that builder over there. And they all had different styles, and all these trails were performing differently, right? And what UROC had to do is sort of kind of make sense of that and knit them all together and make sense of an enormous, huge network. So kind of to answer your question there about the evolution of trails and how do you pick your line and stuff, it's become a lot more strategic when it's a managed sanctioned trail network. But if you were to put in like a list of good to haves for a trail association, a lot of the trails would exist to be like a connection trail or a climb trail or a trail that provides a means to getting from one zone to another. Or if a trail builder approaches you and says, hey, I want to build a trail here, does it fit within that zone? You know, so there's a little bit of science to it. And one of the things that trail associations are good to do is they're not actually the ones building the trails. We're leaning heavily still into the community of volunteers who are building the trails, who have built the trails in the first place, and allowing them still to have vision and still to have an interest in trail building if they want to do that, you know, like, and having a process that allows them to say, hey, well, I want to build a trail and I want to put it in here. Okay, does that fit the plan for the trail strategy? Yes, it does. Great. So let's get a process to go to the landowners, ask permission, can we build this trail? This is the rationale. You know, like, it's going to be an expert trail builder. They built this trail. We're pretty solid on this project. It's going to be good. So having that provision and having that process in place is super important, because if it isn't in place and you don't allow the trail builders to continue doing what they love to do, it's all going to go rogue, and then it's all going to go wrong, and you're going to get a lot of problems and not have sanctioned lines in the network. And what the landowners are really looking for from us as a trail building community is looking after the trail network in such a way that we're not going in and we're building silly trails, we're not building bad trails, we're keeping an eye out for fires, you know, not allowing wildfires to happen, so we're sort of stewards of the land as well. We're building trails with the consideration of less risk and liability, so we're still building rad trails, but we're not building silly features, and we're not building things that are just not conducive to a trail standard. So we're sort of guiding all of that, but at the same time, the trail builder is allowed to still have that freedom to say, okay, well, I'm going to go out to the forest and I'm going to walk out some lines and I'm going to decide on a build. And then the one little extra part that needs to happen is come and quickly ask UROC, or the Trail Association or whatever, and then and make sure it's all okay, and then UROC will put that in place and get that sanctioning in place, and then go over to the builder and say, you're good. You can go in and build your trail, and you know, these are the parameters, these are the requirements, if any, and you know, the whole ethos of allowing trail networks to evolve and keep continuing to get better and keep continuing to be more rad, it's still there, that's still alive. So investing in the builders is absolutely paramount. It's so important. If you don't do that, you're gonna open up so many problems, you know. All these trails are gonna outlive us, you know, think about that. So like, if you're putting in something now and calling it Blockhead, you know, Blockhead's still gonna be here in 100 years' time. You know, it's managed and it's sanctioned, and it's a trail that's historically really important in the network. You know, that story can be told. So that's another really important thing, that if it wasn't sanctioned, then forestry, okay, well, it's not on the map, you know, like it's, or the municipalities, it's not on the map. We're not going to put money to this. We're not going to allow it to be sanctioned. We're not going to put it into the history books, so to speak. So, you know, and humans are inquisitive things. We always want to go places and explore, and, you know, and when we go there, it's nice to get a good feeling and enjoy it, you know, like, and a lot of that speaks true with a trail experience, you know, like whether you're running it, hiking it, or most of all, biking it. You know, if it's not rad and it provides a great experience, then, you know, like, what are you doing? You got to create that fun experience part within the trail, and that trail deserves to stick around forever. So locally, trail associations generally, they'll have a membership, and people can support through a membership, which we at UROC, I am determined that all funds that we get from membership goes back into the dirt, goes back into the trails and maintenance of the trails. And for those that are visiting from out of town, you know, making a donation, like managing and maintaining and running huge trail networks, it's not cheap. You know, there's costs, and if people are coming and they're using the trails and they're getting a buzz out of it, and it's kind of seen as for free, you know, like, well, if you were to go to a bike park, you'd be paying $60, $90, whatever it is for that day to have that experience. If you go to a ski station to ski for a day, you'd be paying whatever it is to have that experience. To go to a trail network, technically you could go there and enjoy it and pay nothing, but it would be pretty rad if those people acknowledged that with a donation. And you can do that through Trail Forks, you can do that through the trail associations locally. We have drop boxes for people can chuck a few bucks in donation boxes in all the bike stores and all the running stores. They support us in that way, and you know, like or put a few bucks behind the local bar for the trail builders. You know, like all the bars in Cumberland have trail builder accounts that you know, what is it called? Pass it on or drink it on or pay forward. You know, like that. So. And that's just a great way to do it. But supporting the trail associations, and you know, if those trail associations are supporting the trail networks and supporting the builders and supporting events and supporting all of these things that advocate for mountain biking and advocate for trail use, you know, that there's a lot of passionate energy goes into that, and it does come at an expense. You know, like buying tools, getting the guys out there, you know. Trees get blown down, water damage to trails, you know, like it doesn't just fix itself. And you know, you're a trail builder, I know I'm a trail builder. It doesn't take 5 minutes to fix a trail. It doesn't take 5 minutes to build a trail. You know, it can sometimes take years. And a trail, I would say, is never finished. It's never a finished product. You can say, okay, I've built this trail, it's open now, you can come and ride it. But you're going back in there pretty soon, and you're going to be tweaking, changing, enhancing. Then a weather event's going to come along, and it's going to damage the trail, or you know, it's going to get muddy, or freeze thaw. You know, it's going to trash it. Yeah. Or you build a rad trail that tens of thousands of people want to ride, and it's just a high volume trail that requires high traffic maintenance. You know, like. So in this instance here in Cumberland, I think I mentioned it before, that it's all private land and it's forestry owned. So basically out there is a tree farm, and it's a working forest. And there's multiple trails threaded through all of this forest, so which were built as unsanctioned trails. I try not to use the word rogue. But it's they're unsanctioned trails. So now, fast forward now today, everything is sanctioned, and what that is it's an understanding that we've got that line on a map. It's in a GPS. It's been GPSed. It's got a line in the maps, and those lines are all filtered into the maps that the forestry companies use and to manage their lands. And they have all these different blocks of land that they're growing different trees at different times of their growth span. And if there is a trail that goes through those lands and or crosses from their land, one private forestry owner company to another owner to municipal land, that one trail has multiple landowners and has multiple people that we need to communicate with. So to get that trail sanctioned and on the map and within a management process, organized, sustainably managed, it's vital, because when the forestry company comes along and then wants to harvest the trees or put in a road or do some civiculture to the forest or whatever it is they need to do, knowing that there is a trail there means that they can either work around it, or we can come up with a way that we can move the trail or rebuild the trail after they've harvested, or that they won't touch the trail when they're harvesting. So this is all in the guise of private forestry lands. So sanctioning really just means that we can manage, everyone can manage their outlook and their processes of what they want to do with the lands. We can close the trail when things need to happen. There's watershed out there as well, so there's, like going in and making sure that we're not putting trails in areas of significant interest or important zones for the watershed. We're trying to pick lines or have trails that are in zones or areas that are not of peak requirement to the forestry companies. Like they're not going to grow so many trees here, so let's try and get the trail put in here, as opposed to putting the trail right the way through this beautiful stand of trees that they're growing to harvest. So giving them longevity. So a tree harvesting cycle, I think, is what, 70, 80 years, something like that. So we know that if we're putting in a trail or we're maintaining a trail that's just been harvested, we've got a 90-year lifespan on that until we're next worried about it. Or if we put a trail through a rocky outcrops that link through zones that they're just not going to grow trees, or it's not great for growing trees, that trail has got a lifespan of forever. So having that process and having that sanctioning agreement for trails is really important for the longevity and for the survival of those trails. And then the last thing that I should mention is that if there wasn't a sanctioning process, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, if there wasn't a sanctioning process and there wasn't a way to get those trails onto the map, trails would just go in there anyway. And if they're not managed and they don't know they're on the map, someone's going to get hurt, or there's going to be a public outcry because a trail was, they busted a road through my trail, and like, why did they do that? And I said, well, they did that because they didn't know about it, and they did that because it wasn't supposed to be there anyway. But we're a population in the world is not getting any smaller, and the requirement to get out and play and have fun is, it's not diminishing, it's getting more and more so. So managing this whole recreation, social license, so to speak, for the private lands is all boils down to sanctioning the trails. So that's with Mosaic Forest Management, and they own the largest portion of the lands out there, 6,500 acres that we have a land agreement for, and the largest portion of that is Mosaic, and then a next largest portion is with Manulife Investment Management. They formerly Hancock Forest Management, and they work with us, and they're both of those organizations are made up of a lot of mountain bikers and trail users, so they're all stoked to be a part of this whole story. And then there's a lot of trails that are on Village of Cumberland lands with the municipal lands for the community park, and their watershed lands. So we have a memorandum of understanding with the Village of Cumberland and the forestry companies that overarches the whole 3 agreements for us to allow us to be out there, and and it's just awesome to be able to keep that whole motion going, to keep Cumberland as a sick place to come and ride your bike. That's it. None of the UROC would exist if we didn't have the land access agreement. That's a key part of our existence, and there's a massive difference between building and striking a trail and maintaining and managing the life of a trail. It's a big deal, but yeah, it's trail building from scratch to finish is the best. Yeah, it's the best. I probably do more of it than ride my bike.
Yeah. Well, it provides you with some flow state of joy, right? So
Yeah.
it's